What's up guys, Michał here. In 1986 I began my education in that school behind me. 3 years later the Iron Curtain has fell. Those two events are not that much connected together, but I use them as an illustration that Poland probably was not the best place for a PC enthusiast way back then. But I had my PC in the 90s, but to say that it wasn't enthusiast grade, it would be an understatement. But today we are going to fix this. I will rebuild my 90s PC and to the spec that I could only dream way back then. I invite you for the ride. So I started to figure out what were the key components of my first computer, what was the feel of that computer, and what were the main parts that kind of made it what it was. And my kind of first thought with that was probably the case. So I started shopping for this case, this one that you are able to see on the screen, and it wasn't easy to find it. It was not like you say, I want a Fantex M2 Elite or something like that. No, I didn't know the name of the case, the manufacturer, basically nothing about this case. And I started to look, to shop for it, and it was nightmare. Whenever I was able to find this case, it was extremely expensive, so something between $150 to up to $200. So really for the case that I thought was only special to me, it was way too expensive for me. Then I thought I found this one case, and it was maybe not in terrible shape, but the shape wasn't. It was very dirty, of course, as you can see. Almost every part was there, but there was some corrosion and it got yellowed. But then I thought, well, let's make a journey and let's try to rebuild this case and let's rebuild the whole computer. But maybe it won't be easy task, but hell, it will be worth the ride. So I bought this case, and immediately I started to work on it. I had to first of all I had to clean it up. So what I did is I basically took it to car wash and jet wash it, and it kind of did the trick. It removed most debris and most dirt that was on the case. By the way, if you ever be wondering if the 12-bar jet wash can do harm to the skin, it will basically cut your hand, so watch out if you will be using jet wash to clean up the case. Regardless, second part was to completely disassemble the case, so I could further clean it up with IPA, isopropyl alcohol, maybe some vinegar. I have used some baking soda to remove the rust from the parts that were rusted with a very good effect. So yeah, if it's not completely rusted through, if the metal is not completely decomposed, you can scrape the rusty layer on top, and it looks pretty damn good. So it's always guess if you will take a look at the pictures, but there is a chance that you can. The best way I have found to scrape the some rust from the surface was to use a little bit of paste made out of baking soda and some water, and use a toothbrush to remove this. There were smaller elements, chromium elements, that I wanted to clean up, and I have used several methods. I have used Coca-Cola to clean those elements. I let it stay there for about, I guess it was a week, and yeah, it kind of cleaned it up a little bit, but not nearly to the state that I wanted it. Then I want to use Dremel tool. I started to use Dremel tool and some polish paste to improve the condition of those elements, but still it wasn't perfect, and I gave up here. So I had almost complete case, but a bit yellowed. So the retrobrighting it is. I figured I could retrobrite the plastic panels of those case. So I did that, and the method I have used was the one made famous by the 8-bit guy. He's got great tutorials how to retrobrite plastic. So I took 1 liter bottle of peroxide and mixed it in proportion 8:1 with water. Then pour it all into a container in a bin. I've put the plastic elements inside, wrapped it with foil to make it possible for all the gases and all the fumes to go out, and to make sure that the water will reach temperature around 50 Celsius degrees on the sun. And then I placed it on the sun for like 8 hours straight. It was not the very hot day, but it was no clouds on the sky whatsoever, 26-27 degrees in a shade in Poland, so as much as the sun as we get here was used for this. And I have to tell you, the effect is subtle, but almost whole yellowing was gone. So I was very pleased with that. And then I retrobrighted also the switches and other components that will be visible, and the whole case is got now this beautiful beige color. Almost exactly, it's been 20 years since I've seen that case in a brand new condition, but as far as I can tell, it looks very close to how it looked when it was brand new. Then was the second part. The second part was kind of tricky. I knew as I was getting this case that the power supply was not working. So I tried to repair it and measure some voltages, and it turned out that the voltage was coming in, but just behind the transformer there was nothing. So my transformer in this power supply was dead, and that was beyond of the time that I was willing to spend to repair the original power supply. So I took another power supply in a working condition, and I decided to move it to the enclosure of the original power supply, basically to build the power supply inside the original enclosure. As tricky as it was, because the board didn't fit, I had to create a plastic shroud to divide the metal from enclosure. There was a lot of work, a bit of soldering. I had to resolder the fan, put a small resistor between a power supply and a fan, because I had to switch up the fan too, because the original from this power supply didn't fit. And as I turned it on, it was so loud that I have put some resistor to be able to kind of manage the sound to make this computer quiet. So yeah, it was a lot of work, but at the end I had a power supply that looked almost like the original. If you want disassemble this computer, or even if you will do, you won't notice that this is not an original power supply. So that was basically success. Then it was processor, mainboard, and RAM. At this point, at this moment, you need to figure out what kind of computer you would like to build. It will be a retro machine, but what kind of games? I wanted to play everything from the 90s. So I wanted to be able to play Prince of Persia, and I wanted to be able to play Quake. So that's pretty bright scope, if you ask me. So I knew that I needed, because I wanted to be able to play Duke Nukem and Quake was the biggest reason. You need to go with Pentium processor. So I basically took 166 MHz MMX processor, and I figured the thing that I could do is I've downclocked this to 150 MHz just for the longevity stakes. I wanted this computer to be able to withstand another 15 years. So I've downclocked this, and it turned out to be 150 MHz Pentium with 32 MB of RAM on Intel VX board. This board is very nice. It will basically give me everything that I will need. It has IDE controllers. It has even boot from a CD-ROM, which wasn't that obvious that day. And I wanted to build a CD-ROM in this computer. It gave me a floppy controller, and I wanted to use a floppy. It has some nice feature, like you don't need to connect the fan for the Pentium processor with a Molex connector. There is a 3-pin connector on the board. So yeah, as you know, if you have built computers in that day, that would be a pretty nice board. Intel's VX gives you basically everything from Pentium 75 to 233 standard options. There were also some later CPUs that would be that you would be able to retrofit in this board, but it's kind of nice board. So I went with that. And here we come to a graphic card, because that's the one thing that I didn't mention. I use a standard S3 64 plus 1 megabyte PCI, not PCIe graphic card with a Voodoo accelerator. So what Voodoo accelerator does is basically the same as on Campus for sound. It allows you to play OpenGL versions of the games that we had. Most of us had, I didn't have Voodoo, so it will be the first time with this technology for me. Obviously I had Riva, TNTs and GeForces and everything, all that kind of jazz, but in the 90s I was a teenager, so I didn't work and I were unable to buy something as pricey and sophisticated as Voodoo, and also something that you couldn't say to your parents, well, I could learn something with that. No, they knew it was for gaming. If you had a Voodoo back then, I envy you. I didn't. I can play with this now, so I got this card and I'm very, very eager to play OpenGL games and to catch up here in that department, so that will be a very exciting. Keyboard is obvious. You need to take IBM Model M. Why? Because it's cool, it sounds cool, it's heavy, it's joy to type, it doesn't have Windows 95 buttons, and I wanted to use Windows 3.11 and MS-DOS, and I didn't want it to have anything from the era from Windows 95. Maybe I will install, and I probably will install later on Windows 95, but my main goal is MS-DOS with Windows 3.11. Floppies. You can argue that 5¼ inch floppy drive doesn't fit to a Pentium build, and you would be right. But my original AT system 286 had one 5.25-inch drive, and because of the sounds, because of the operating systems that I would like to put later onto this computer, I really wanted to have this floppy. It is a bit inconsistent with the rest of the build, but it looks amazing in this case, you gotta admit. So I wanted to have 5.25 and 3.5-inch drive, because basically in a retro system, believe it or not, floppies can make your life easier. You could go with Gotek, and that would be considerably better choice, but it doesn't look as cool. I don't like how Amiga computers looks with Gotek when it's exposed. I don't like the way they look on a retro system. It's a personal thing. I wanted to use a floppy. The way I record floppies is I take card reader and floppy drive and connect it with my Linux computer, and there is a command that is called dd. You can basically type dd if off and take emg image file of a floppy and basically burn it to a floppy disk. Even from you can use Fedora 27 for that. It is not a problem as long as you have USB floppy 3.5-inch drive connected to Linux computer. You can you can write any MS-DOS image file to a floppy and still use it for as long as the drive is in a good condition, for as long as you have floppies. I have, so it's a bit to a nostalgia, but yeah, these are not only to decorate the system, but I'm actually using those floppies, and I think it's nice to use it that way. Hard drive. I'm not going to use a hard drive. I've been considering using something like old MFN 20 megabytes drive just purely for the sounds, but no, compact flash is it is. I use a compact flash to IDE adapter, and actually two of them. The way that I've decided to set this up, it's kind of interesting approach. In MS-DOS computer, in an old BIOS, the way that it was done, it was first IDE controller, master drive, first IDE controller, slave drive, second IDE controller, master drive, fourth IDE controller, slave drive. So basically, the PC will try to boot in that order. It has an advantage and disadvantage, but we are going to use this to our advantage. So my goal is to put MS-DOS booting compact flash card inside of this computer and connect this to a secondary IDE controller. If there won't be bootable compact flash card in the first controller, computer in the first IDE channel, the computer will go directly to the second one and basically give me a straight boot to MS-DOS with Windows 3.11. If I would like to boot from something else, if I, for example, would like to play a bit with Windows 98 or Windows NT, I can just put the compact flash from the behind of the computer and it will boot from there. So you won't have to change any roles, change any booting sequences in a BIOS. Basically, you stick a bootable compact flash behind, done. You pull it out, done. You can take out one of this card, connect it to your Linux computer, copy all the games you want, done. You just need to reboot the computer, and that's it. You can plug it out. So one card inside, one card accessible from the behind. I needed to do some work building some brackets for it. It was fun. I didn't want to drill again. I never drill any holes in retro computer cases on any retro hardware. So I've built some mediators to be able to screw this by using only the holes that were originally in system, so I am able to 100% take everything out and have this case in a original state. So that was also the goal with this build. Hardest part, although I never suspected it, was to get a decent CD-ROM drive, believe it or not. Well, I wanted something that would be very compatible with old MS-DOS, so those drivers. Old, from the era, not 52, not CD burner, they were way too expensive for me back then to have them. So something, well, anything between a quadruple speed CD-ROM to maybe 12 times. And I have found Mitsumi, which is great. It works with OAC driver, which is very, very compatible. It takes not that much memory, which is important for MS-DOS gaming. And it was in perfectly working condition. I only needed to clean it up, but it didn't match the color scheme. So that was one fail. It's too bad. Probably I will change the CD-ROM drive at some point. Oh, with that said, it works good, and I would love to play Phantasmagoria. I would love to, that's 8 CD-ROM discs, as far as I remember, there were 8. I would like to play Wing Commander for Price of Fortune, which are, as far as I remember, 6 drive, and other multi-CD-ROM games, so there's that. I know that the color doesn't match that great, but it works, and it is what it is. Sometimes it's not that easy to find something. There's really one drive that I would love to have. It's a single speed Mitsumi, but imagine playing American laser games with those cutscenes. Basically the whole game is a movie with single speed CD-ROM drive. It's almost impossible, so yeah, there's that. Another very important thing, it's sound. PC gaming, MS-DOS gaming is all about sound. You need two things. You need a sound blaster, which some FM synthesis capability, but you need something more, and it's called Sound Canvas. And Sound Canvas is basically it's something that takes media output through a joystick port in UART, fake UART mode, and it basically converts those MIDI sounds by using some samples into something that you can hear that is actually MIDI music, and enjoy the music like this. Now, as the computer is done, I almost feel sorry. That's it. But I'm left with it, and I'm able to have some fun with this computer. I will be able to play all the games from the 90s, all the games that I loved, all the games that I missed. So that's a great thing to have. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up, subscribe. I'm under 1000 subs, so I'm unable to monetize my video. If you will hit subscribe button, it will help me, so that's the one way to support the channel. Hit the like button, leave a comment down there in the comment section if you would like to tell your story about the favorite game you play. If you would like to tell me about a game to try out from the era, leave the comments. I always enjoyed responding. I try to respond to almost all of them. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Bye!